It was one of those chillaxed weekends in 2021, towards the end of it. And I had linked up with one of my friends who had invited me to his place because I think I was coming from a background where I've been so busy, like I had immersed myself in the journalism thing because, first of all, I wanted to make my dad proud because I was also coming from a year where I just lost my dad. And then I was trying to be independent and stand on my own. But there were so many obstacles in between. So I happened to have transitioned from being a tutor, doing radio still, and then transitioned to television. Previously, I had done campus radio, which actually led me to my breakthrough in the mainstream space. So I was, I say, exceptional at what I was doing that time. And, the gig was actually part of what was making me earn a living. But there was a lot of warfares within that gig that, I say, triggered a lot of mental health issues, basing off of that I was coming from, a place where I had just lost my dad. I had just met my mom, who I had never heard from for decades. Now I was adjusting emotionally and mentally as well to the reality of everything that was going down, and then to the gig as well, and then the pressure of being on radio and then on TV and then being a tutor. So I was just lost, like I didn't know who I was. And plus, I was still young. I'm still young anyways, yeah. But I was all over the place. So mentally, I was in this convoluted space where I never understood what exactly was happening. But like I said, there's a lot of warfares, a lot of resistance, a lot of shaming and threats at the gig. So what happened was, um, between me finishing my degree, because I had just graduated with my diploma, then finishing my degree, ready to graduate. But then at some point, especially after my dad, passed on, I dropped out of school, and I couldn't take it mentally. It was too much. It was weighing me down, and then the gig, and then keeping up. So I stopped going to school. I say maybe, well, yeah, I say I deferred to something, yeah. So with like I said, in that miasma of all those things happening, I didn't know who I was. So a friend of mine who we had been in touch, I think the other year, and who was following up on my journey, was like, you know what, let's hang out on a weekend. So he invited me to his place. She had just, he had just sent home away his chile, and before that, there was like a small charade going on, but people were leaving actually because it was on a Saturday afternoon. So we started watching stuff. I was actually taking him through some of the trending shows, in the United States, especially those that were recovering after the COVID-19, pandemic. So my phone is right over there on the charger. We are busy watching through stuff and scrolling through Netflix, and I see an email. Voo, voo, voo. On checking the notification, you have been suspended and da 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 da. You will no longer, Oh my gosh, it was ridiculous. Like, I had never gone through. I'd say, have you ever experienced something that maybe you expected it would happen, but not that way or that sooner? Because I was also coming from a season where I had dreaded something just fearful and just disastrous happening, and then my dad ended up dying. But again, with this gig, there was a lot of warfares and battles that had been placed in front of me, from just so much that I can't mention into the nitty-gritties of it. But I was battling it emotionally and mentally every day, and staying in that gig. And since there was a bit of, like, I'd say, resentment, especially towards, there's this woman HR who came in, and she made it her business to frustrate me in the gig. So this is what she did. I was earning 28,000, right? She deducted my payment until ikafika 17,000. Yeah. So when I went there to ask why, she had a lot of very dramatic, and then it became an email exchange, and then it became warnings and threats, and then it became, we're gonna fire you, and then it became, now goodbye. So I was so infuriated and so angry. I called one of my friends who's a lawyer, and my friend who's an advocate as well of the High Court, who was my desk mate at Fountain Gate School. Shout out to David Ogara. And the thought was, let's sue. But again, if I did the calculations, and I was like, whoa, this is gonna cost me money. And plus, That time was not, I had not like established, I'd say, contacts already in the mainstream broadcast space, but I knew some people, and there were people as well who were following up on my career. So when I exited, I knew that was it because I had gone through so much. I was a news anchor and a reporter at the same time, a tutor at the same time, I'd say a radio presenter. I'd come home in the evening after, the broadcast, and I'd undress up and just fall on the floor and cry like a stupid baby, like I was bleeding internally. And that made it even harder for me to be, I'd say, easy breezy. So I ended up building this wall that was so high. In some sort, like, people thought that, this dude is a is problematic. He has issues. He's dealing with this and that. But again, I never anticipated that because it hit me at the time when I was going through financial issues. And then what followed thereafter was now, the landlord, the rent, and then I ended up becoming sick. I was admitted in hospital, and then just, the hospital bill just went up, and nobody. It was not easy for me to be bailed out. There's some friends who had to come through. Shout out to Maureen, who was there was a time I thought I was dying. Yeah, because when all those things were happening, it just sounded and it felt like my world was tumbling down. I was in mental disarray and just dysmorphia. I couldn't, like, I went through, I'd say, some sort of like an avalanche of mental explosion, and it was difficult to like carry on immediately. But thank God, there's a lot of people who reached out and asked, what's not happening to you? I've not seen you on the air and whatnot. And I remember receiving a call from K24. There's a producer who knew me from, I think, Ibru TV, and way back when I used to do all those behind the scenes interviews. And he was like, you know what, we're coming up with a talk show. Come for an interview and see if we can maybe do some sort of like a screen test. And I went, so it never surfaced, but we had like 5 meetings, and then somebody ended up like stood up on me, and yeah, we forgot. So on my way, I think on my way back home after the K24 gig had flopped, I received a phone call from somebody from the MCK, and he was like, you know what, your details have been shared, and we want to connect you to somebody at Radio Africa. And that's how I got a chance to go work at Radio Africa. I became a trainee presenter for Kiss FM and Classic 105, and as well as I was a producer, a digital producer as well for Gideon Ghost in the Morning, Bustani la Masao Japani, alongside Mbusi and Lion Teke Teke. I worked very close. There's a way Mbusi tried to bully me, but we sorted up things. Giddy was just another story for another day. Ghost was fantastic. Masao Japani, we ended up becoming friends anyways. And then I also ended up producing Mazungumzo Waziwazi, still on Radio Jambo for Abramuel Mololo. So within, I'd say, a duration of like 5 months, I got another TV gig to be a morning show presenter. And from thereafter, I'd say, God just vindicated me. There was a lot of battles and obstacles that had been placed in front of me, and I was fighting them on my own. But God has always been on my side, and goodness gracious, it has not been an easy one. And so I just want to encourage anyone, if you're going through storms, just know that it could get worse, or it could be the worst, but eventually you will end up making it through. You'll end up making it through, because you can never be given a burden more than you can carry. But what annoyed me is you deducted my salary. It became a fight for me to be paid. It was so annoying. Like, it triggered a lot of mental health issues in me. But thank God I healed, and thank you, God, we are here now.